Make sure. If you're disconnected, please log back in reusing the credentials provided to you via registration or the calendar invitation. We strive in all of our work to provide a learning environment based on psychological safety to set the necessary context for you to speak your truth as freely as possible. We encourage you to be present, remain respectful and courteous, and use chat responsibly to give everyone an opportunity to speak. While in this main training space, we encourage camera use. We don't want our speaker to feel alone out there. But you will remain muted to limit background noise during the course of the presentation. Next slide. We also advise you to update your name and pronouns on Zoom for acknowledgement by our presenter. We hope to have an interactive training and would like to know who's present so we can record your attendance. During our time together, we'll hear material from our presenter followed by a Q&A. And there we will be asking some questions during our time, so definitely access that chat box. If you haven't already done so, just use that chat box to say good morning to us and hello. We definitely will be checking it throughout, as I said, this session in order to check in with your experiences, check in on those brainstorming activities that we expect. We will make every effort to answer each of your questions, and we may call you if your name, if your question is unclear or requires clarification. We definitely discourage screenshots or photo images of this webinar or any copies of its attendees. If you'd like to take any screenshots, we encourage you to reach out to myself or a member of the Training Center team via chat or email. Finally, we do not permit the use of AI notes or other note-taking features, and a member of our production team will ensure that we dismiss the option from the platform if it arrives. With that being said, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Andrea Sanchez, who is a member of our workforce team, to talk to you about their experience in enhancing preceptorships and effective communication skills. Andreas?
Thank you so much, Tracy. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to have you all here to talk about and discuss the importance of communication skills when it comes to preceptorship. This session is designed to give you some practical tools, some space for reflection. So we'll be doing a couple of breakout sessions and also provide you with some strategies to support both your growth and the success of your interns, externs, learners. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna share my screen here. All right. And so there are four main objectives that we're gonna cover in this session. All right, we're going to recognize the importance and impact of what an effective preceptor is when it comes to communication, but focusing specifically on workforce development. So the second objective is to build key communication skills to strengthen that preceptor-intern relationship. We're also going to discuss enhancing communication strategies to improve the experience for both the preceptor and the intern, and then understand the value of preceptorship in shaping the healthcare workforce. So we're going to be covering quite a bit in this training and really having discussions around what that means, right? Whether you have experience in precepting students, or not, this will be a valuable training to kind of get you started and thinking about some things, right, that you might have not thought before. If you have experience, if you don't, this will give you an idea if you're doing this for the first time of, what direction to take and where to go. I have a quick question to get us started for today. There are quite a few of you, so we won't have the opportunity to go around to everybody, but I want you to use your chat box. If you would like to come off mic, that is also great as well. But I have this question for you as our icebreaker for this morning. And as you think about stepping into the role, right, if you don't have experience of a preceptor, what beliefs, concerns, and strengths, right? Do you bring to this experience, right? Whether you have experience, whether you haven't, but are wanting to do this. I want you to answer this question. And again, using the chat box and or also coming off a mic and sharing your answer. Any takers here?
Hi, this is David over at East Valley. I think for me, I think I like to foster an environment where mistakes are okay. I tell everyone a mistake's only a mistake if you don't learn from it. So I think having that environment of, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. It's just owning up to it and just kind of being able to talk about it and really, hey, we're gonna learn from this. And um, I think that's kind of one of my beliefs and one of my strengths is just that communication of those mistakes and just trying to make sure that we're sharing our experiences because we've all made mistakes and I think that's how we've gotten better and got into where we are by, those learning experiences and just switching that from a mistake to a learning experience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, David. Yeah, it's really important. I think, the fact that you brought up, there are going to be not being afraid to make mistakes, right? We are human. We are going to not know all of the answers from the get-go, but it's important to learn from those things and move forward with enhancing our skills. Anyone else? I see Vivian. A concern is that I want to ensure I'm guiding them appropriately. Yeah, yeah, that's also, that's an important concern to bring up. Yeah, we are guiding, new students and providing them, mentorship essentially, right, as they are learning these new skills. So yes, I can understand that concern of, are you guiding them in the right direction, right? Are you providing them all of the feedback and teaching them the skills that they need to know? Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? If I can have maybe one more person share out. All right, I have Anu, who says providing knowledge and information that is relevant and valid and easily understandable format and help with additional, sorry, I can't see the whole message here. Additional
Additional
help.
help if needed.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Tracy. Yeah, definitely. So thank you all for sharing those answers. If you didn't get an opportunity to share out, just really thinking about I think addressing all of these all of these fears, all of these concerns, but also thinking about your strengths, right? What do you bring to the table if you're already supervising people, right? If you've supervised people in the past, right, and haven't done so in a while, there's still room to think about some of those strengths and think about how you can guide folks through this process. All right. So preceptorship involves various things, right? It's about not only teaching the technical skills, right? But it's also about providing consistent mentorship, right? And what that means is that it's not just about, we're not throwing people out to the wolves, right? And say, these are the things that you need to do. It's about really guiding them through the process of each step. And that could be, difficult in a high-paced work environment. However, there are ways to mentor someone through this process, right? Preceptorship is also about raising awareness about healthcare careers. I lead a program called AHEC Community Health Scholars. A lot of the students, this is their first professional opportunity. And so a lot of students are also not aware of what different positions there might be available at the health center. So this might be their first experience. And so you're also raising awareness about some of those careers, right? It's also about aligning career goals within community health, right? How do their careers or their experience aligns with the goals of the organization, right? And it's your job to really define what that could mean for any student. It's also about creating a structured and supportive learning experience, right? So it's not about just assigning people to do a specific task or a list of tasks. It's really about creating that structured experience for them to be able to learn and getting that hands-on experience in your health center, right? A knowledgeable healthcare professional offers guidance, right, and offers feedback to be able to support that person. Without that feedback, right, folks are kind of in the dark about whether they are learning the skills correctly or not. So it's also important that that consistent mentorship is what really bridges the gap, right, between theory, the things that they're learning in the classroom, and also the practical, right, the actual practicing some of these skills, which can often be complex, and especially seeing it hands-on, live and in color in your health center, right? So according to some studies, mentoring programs can also improve retention rates. So this is also important because if you are looking to fill positions at your health center, these interns are an opportunity for you to really teach them from the very beginning, right? The processes of right, how to administer XYZ, right? So these clinical skills, in learning these clinical skills, you're essentially helping boost some of their confidence and actually practicing them, especially for, again, new professionals in this field. So mentorship ensures that interns feel supported. They're able to navigate patient care, which is the most important thing, right? And helping reduce some of that anxiety in, whether they're scared of making mistakes, right? Or they're just trying to navigate learning these skills as they're doing it hands-on. So now that we have an understanding of what preceptorship is, I'm going to talk about the preceptor relationship. So preceptorship plays an important role in the development of interns by guiding them through those complex, the complexities of clinical practice, right? So it's assisting them in shaping not only their technical skills, but also their professional competencies. So how are you providing an opportunity for both, right? It also allows experienced preceptors to guide interns into those real world settings, right? These are things that they're experiencing for the first time, right? And I can go back to an example of one of my of students that go through my program, is that a lot of the things, right, they get to go through case studies, they get to learn about the concepts, but they don't necessarily know how to apply them just yet, right? We do trainings on customer service, and if this is their first experience, right, them managing, a patient that might be in a crisis situation, right, is going to be very difficult for the first time. So we need to think about some of these things, right? And also think about even your own experiences. The first time you ever, started working at a health center, right? Or even your first job, what that process was like for you. And what would have been some helpful things that would have supported you through learning some of the some of the skills that you had to learn to do your job effectively, right? This relationship is it's very crucial because that hands-on experience ultimately impacts patient outcomes, right? So we need to think about how our training, right, and how we're guiding and mentoring these students is going to impact, right, patient care at the end of the day, right? Guidance for skill and competency development. So Preceptors provide a framework for interns to build clinical skills and competencies. And this happens through a couple of different ways. So it's through the direct and supervised, right, patient care, which allows interns to manage the, complex decision making, critical thinking, while under the mentorship of that experienced professional. But also the professional aspect of things, right? These are some of those soft skills, like I mentioned, customer service. So these are all things that you need to think about, right, as you are guiding students through their externship or internship, right? Statistics show that in a 2020 study that about 70% of healthcare trainees report feeling more confident in their skills after participating in a structured preceptorship or mentorship program. That's huge, right? 70% is a huge number. So when students are coming out of those opportunities, right, they're feeling more confident. They're feeling like they're being trained. They're feeling more sure about those clinical skills that they've practiced while in their experience, right? The importance of two-way communication in these scenarios, right? Effective communication is essentially the backbone of what a successful preceptorship looks like, right? That two-way communication ensures that both the preceptor and the intern are aligned in their goals and expectations, right? So taking a few moments from the very beginning and really talking to the intern, extern, right? What their goals are, right? Aside of obviously learning the clinical competencies, right? What are their expectations, right? Having that communication from the very beginning will eliminate a lot of the, maybe the intern feeling unsatisfied, or even you as a preceptor feeling unsatisfied with that experience. Right. So clear communication fosters mutual understanding where interns can voice uncertainties, right? They're more likely to come to you and feel comfortable in saying, hey, I've been practicing this skill, but I'm still not 100% sure how to do it. Can you walk me through these steps, right? And you are in return able to provide that constructive feedback and insights as to how they can navigate those uncertainties, right? And really get to the point where they're feeling comfortable with practicing these skills. Now, the benefits of two-way communication, it really helps avoid misunderstandings, right? It ensures that interns are aligned with the actual training that you're providing. So it builds trust over time, right? Just think about any relationship that you have, right? It takes a little bit of time to get to know people and get to, learn more about them, their goals, their aspirations. The same thing, these are folks that are coming into the field and wanting to start their careers in community health, right? So building that trust and encouraging interns to seek feedback, right, is also important, right, because it can clarify a lot of things for them. So this essentially creates a collaborative approach to learning, right, between you and the intern. So some statistics show that healthcare interns who engage in frequent open communication with their preceptors are 50% more likely to achieve their clinical competency goals. That's huge, right? And that's essentially what we want, right? As someone who manages a program for students that are going into these spaces, I want students to come out of those experiences feeling more comfortable, right, with what they're learning, because they're going to be looking for employment shortly after. Right. And the more that they learn hands-on, the more likely they are, one, to be hired, right, to feel confident in applying for these jobs, right, and getting hired, and also just feeling more confident in themselves that they made the right decision in going into these fields. Right. I can't, there have been, in the time that I've ran this program, I've had students that eventually go into the health center, and there are various factors, but they sometimes, reconsider, right? This might not be for them, right? But part of the process could have been that there's some disconnect there, right? That's part of it. The other things could be other personal things going on, but that this creates a supportive space, right? When you are able to guide folks and really create that structured training opportunity for them. Now, continuous feedback is also essential. It helps interns recognize strengths, right? What are their strengths? So they're already coming in, right? They might already be, practicing some of the skills and feeling really confident about what they're doing there. And there might be areas where they're not. So that feedback, right? You actually seeing them, practice these skills and kind of providing some pointers, and this might be a way that you can try this, right? That becomes important to them. I can still think back to some of my early experiences and still think about some of the ways that certain managers, leaders, right, trained me, and it still comes in handy today, right? So you're really, what you're doing is you're providing that guidance and support, and giving them those skills that they might utilize, right, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So think about that, right? You're really shaping people as they're coming in for these opportunities. So, don't wait for formal evaluations. Provide that feedback live and in color, right? It provides interns with immediate insights on things that they could be improving, and where their performance is. So in a 2019 survey, they found that about 85% of interns improved their clinical decision-making abilities when they received regular feedback. 85% is a large number, right? So essentially, you're creating confident, interns or future employees. In the contrast of that, they compared it to 45% who received maybe periodic feedback, right, were not as effective, right? They did not feel as confident in those decision-making abilities. So the importance of communication for strong learning foundation means that communication isn't just about that technical exchange, right? We're not at a bank, right? We work with people on a daily basis. It's not transactional. It's really about building a foundation and creating a supportive learning environment, right? So being clear and empathetic in your communication, right? It creates a culture of openness, right? And learning and making it easier for interns to ask those important questions, admitting mistakes, which is huge, right? And seeking guidance when they're not feeling 100% confident, right? So right, in about 73% of healthcare trainees reported feeling more empowered and capable of taking on clinical responsibilities when their preceptors encouraged open dialogue. So again, right, these numbers are not just, 5, 10%. We're talking about 80, 73%, right? 70%. So these, you're really there to shape not only their experience, but again, that long-term, support and feedback that they will need as they navigate learning new skills. Right. So, what is not preceptorship, right? Preceptorship isn't about offloading busy work or supplementing staff shortages, right? That formula is will drive people away, right? If they're not being guided through these experiences. One, there are possibilities that they could do something incorrectly, and again, we're talking about patients, right? And so we want to make sure that they have all of the support that they need, right? It's a developmental experience for that intern, right? And they shouldn't be treated or we shouldn't have the same expectations as an employee, right? Because the focus is on growth and not capacity, right? Kind of seeing where they start off, right? Where their strengths are when they come to you, right? And developing those strengths over time so that they're able and capable of fulfilling those duties as an employee. So interns shouldn't be expected to perform tasks primarily to address staff shortages or offloading that work, right? Their role is to learn and develop rather than to fulfill operational functions, right? So you also have to think about the capacity that you have as a preceptor, right? Do you have the time to really guide people through this process? Are you setting times aside, right? Do you have a plan to set times aside to do those check-ins, and really provide that structure that these students need, that as they're coming in to your health center, right? So it's about, right, role clarity, right? Assigning those responsibilities, listing those responsibilities ensures that interns are not overburdened, right? So we're not giving, 10 tasks at one time, right? We're really thinking about a task at a time and seeing how they perform, or a couple of tasks at a time, seeing how they perform. Are they able to handle more than one task at a time, right? All of these different things. And having those learning objectives, what is it that they're there to learn? Or if you already have a plan, really discussing what that plan looks like, right? Which can lead to, if there is no plan, right? If there is no structure, then that could lead to frustration on both sides, right? You're not getting, the goals accomplished that you wanted, right? The tasks accomplished that you wanted, and the student is also feeling frustrated, right? And they're not really learning much, if they're being bombarded with so much at one time. So what is the value of preceptorship, right? It increases the quality of patient care, right? That's really our bottom line, is that we want folks to understand what patient care really is, and that we're taking care of patients as they're walking through our doors, right? Preceptors play a really important role in shaping the quality of patient care and ensuring that interns adhere to evidence-based practices, right? Which can lead to minimizing errors, right? Enhancing safety for patients, and also improving those patient outcomes as well. So a well-trained person, right, is going to cover all of these different things, right? Right, the errors are going to be minimal, right? They're going to think ahead for the safety of patients, and also long-term, right, developing that trust relationships with patients that lead to those increased clinical outcomes, right? Trainees transition from the classroom to learning hands-on, right? And so they rely heavily on you as the preceptors to think about, how am I going to teach this person to apply this theory that they learned in the classroom, right, to actual skills. So preceptors ensure that that best practices are followed, which is essential for healthcare environments and the patient safety. So I mentioned earlier that how this is all linked to workforce development, right? As you're guiding these new professionals, and they're learning from you in this environment, it really shortens the curve, right? It ensures that new folks are job ready, essentially, right? A lot of in the AHEC Scholars Program that I manage, a lot of the students really want these opportunities, not only because they're wanting to practice these skills, because they want to be job ready, right, to apply for employment after they're done with their programs. We've had some students that have been hired on by the health centers right after. And so, right, this is your opportunity to really shape an employee, right, from the get-go, right, which is really important. Preceptors or preceptorship also supports workforce retention, right? I mentioned all of those statistics in the last slide. And so when we think about retention, right, folks are more likely to feel connected to the health center, to, right, the mission, the vision of the organization, when they receive mentorship, feedback, and support as they're learning these skills, right? They're feeling closer to the organization. They're feeling connected to the patients that they're seeing, right? All of these things really support these new hires with feeling more prepared to stay in those positions, right? You are also supporting in reducing turnover rates. If the person is coming to you from the get-go and they're learning all of these skills, right? And they're not only the skills, right, but all of the policies, procedures, right, the operational side of things at your health center, they're more comfortable, right? They're feeling more comfortable. So that's going to reduce any turnover rates, right, if they are to be hired at their health center. Because at the end of the day, right, these are costly and disruptive when we have large amount of turnover at your health centers, right? We have to think about leadership development as well, right? As a preceptor, preceptorship is really a platform for experienced healthcare professionals to grow in their own leadership. So not only are you, right, providing feedback to a medical assistant, you are really shaping leaders, right, in this process, right, and transforming people in their experiences, right? This collaboration encourages critical thinking, problem solving, right? When we have these types of relationships of mentor-mentee, right, providing that feedback, it really creates an open space for discussing problem solving, right? That open communication that you need to get things done. But also in return, right, you're promoting leadership. You're essentially giving folks tools to feel comfortable, confident, and be leaders in their roles, right? Regardless of title, right? Anyone can be a leader in their role. And so essentially that's what you're creating, right? You're creating leaders in those roles that can take on, they can practice the skills, that can take on, more than one task at a time, right? Multitasking. You are creating, leaders that are capable and confident to handle, difficult situations and are able to make, decision then and there, right? If they are to come across a conflict throughout their experience and then also after they're, hired. I have a question for you. So using the chat box, or again, you can use the raise hand button, or you can come off mute. What do you think is the role of an intern, now that I've kind of gone a little bit over some of the concepts and an important, kind of a little bit of description? How do you see, or what do you think is the role of an intern? I see your feedback, Anu. It says feedback should include both positive and negative, not just positive. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, feel free to drop your answers in the chat, or you can come off mute as well.
Hi, Andres. First of all, thank you so much. This is so refreshing. This is Anu. So I would say for an intern, first of all, they need to know why they are interning and what is the purpose of their internship.
Yeah.
So knowing what they are for and then who they are going to work with. So they need to maybe communicate well and establish a good relationship and understand their preceptor, whether they are in good terms, and be able to express probably if they don't feel comfortable, so that at the beginning then they can set the stage for what to expect, and that way even the preceptor knows about the intern, and then hopefully they'll have an amicable relationship through that internship course.
Yes.
That's how I feel, because I feel like somewhere along the lines the communication is the key, and if that's not as well as it needs to be, that's where things get disconnected, and there'll be issues. That's what I found. I felt
Yeah.
over the years of experience. That's all I feel.
Yeah, thank you, Anu. So yeah, you mentioned a really important thing that I also I think I might have mentioned a little bit earlier. It's really about learning, right? What the goals are of the intern, what they want to accomplish, really taking time to sit with them and talking about these things, having that open communication about that, and setting that foundation from the very get-go. Thank you. Also see in the chat that Angela put, sharing shadow opportunities of different things that staff do, right? A way for them to seek interest in what they want to do. Yeah. Again, you know, a lot of the folks that I in my program, they sometimes don't know what exactly they want to do, right? But they want to get some of that experience, or, you know, some type of experience to kind of explore those things, right? So they're also in an exploration stage. And then I see Desiree say, to get exposure to unique fields that they might not otherwise get elsewhere. Absolutely, right? So we you know, we have to think about you know, when we're mentoring these folks, is they're coming essentially blank slate sometimes, right? Not sure exactly what they want to do or what direction they want to go in their professional career. So this is a great opportunity for you to expose them to that, right? And giving them the opportunity to explore various things within the health center, right, within different roles. One of the things that we do at CCALAC when we have new employees is everybody gets to meet with the CEO, the COO, with our kind of some of our leadership managers, some of our team members to really you know, just sit and talk about what we do in these roles. And so that's really important because oftentimes, especially in a virtual environment, right, we don't get to see people very often. And so that becomes really important as, you know, either roles become vacant and people express interest in doing other things. So, you know, think about how you navigate that as well in your health center. All right, thank you for that. So I want to provide you with some information, right? So the role of the intern really includes a couple of different things, which are skill development, supportive contributions, and exposure to that workplace culture. So about 70% of interns report gaining practical job-ready skills during their internships, right? Again, these numbers are not just 5%, right? We're talking about 70% of interns feel that they are gaining, right, that those critical skills that they need. Supportive contributions, right? Interns again, you know, come in as a, you know, sometimes blank slate or have worked in other places. They might be able to provide you with some insight, right, into you know, new things, new ways of doing things. So having those conversations and having that two-way open communication really allows for those opportunities, right? We don't know everything, right? So in them coming in, right, don't just assume that they have absolutely no, right? A lot of us have life experience, right? Have had previous jobs that might not have been in healthcare, but still contribute towards learning some of these skills, right? And then exposure to workplace culture. So about 81% of interns say that internships improve their understanding of what the organizational culture is, and professional expectations, right? And this could be as simple as just knowing their schedule. Again, we might, right, these folks might be brand new to the workforce in general, right? So they might not even know, right, how to navigate some of these things. It's also a bridge to employment, right? Yeah, a lot of folks are going to be looking for employment after, are hopeful that they might get hired at the health centers that they're doing their externships. It doesn't always happen, right? But in certain cases, like I mentioned for one of my programs, and we have a couple of other programs that I'll talk about later as I give you some resources. But you know, a lot of folks do appreciate those experiences, right? And it makes them more ready to either, whether they apply at your own health center or somewhere else, right? They are walking away with valuable experiences. Again, innovation and fresh perspectives. Sometimes, right, new professionals bring, whether they're more tech savvy, whether they're, right, there are skills that they've learned, life experiences that they've had. These are all important things that they're bringing to the table. So how do you really, allow them to present these things, right? It's through conversation and allowing them to grow within their role. And then the other piece is about networking and mentorship, right? This is also an opportunity for them to network, with other professionals, getting to learn about what they do in their jobs, right? Again, this might spark an interest for them, right? So internships provide structured mentorship opportunities, and 85% of interns believe professional connections made during those internships positively impact their career trajectory. Right. And I can, one of the students that just went through my program, she actually connected with the doctor that actually oversees all of the AIC Scholars Program at the state level. And it was, she took it upon herself to email him. All students get a certificate. His name was on it. And she wants to be a physician in the future, and took that as an opportunity to network, right? Took that as an opportunity to seek someone that's already in the role, to get some guidance and mentorship. So these students really take a lot of those experiences for their benefit, right? Whether short-term, long-term, they really gain a lot. So I'll chat a little bit about, I want to share a quick story of my first internship experience. I ended up in a nonprofit organization that supported survivors of sexual assault. It was a really, as interns, we were essentially assigned to a hotline to provide basically support to survivors as they went to the hospital. And so part of my training was a week's long. It was I remember it was a 40-hour training, Monday through Friday. And we had all types of perspectives come and talk to us, right? Folks from the police department, folks from the hospitals, folks from, we also had a couple of people from, that had been volunteers at the hotline for years, right? So the hotline was primarily, there were, I think, a few paid folks, but the majority was volunteers in the community that supported in answering these calls. And you could get a range of calls on this hotline. It wasn't just for survivors of sexual assault. It was a range of different phone calls that you would receive during shifts. And so it was, I remember just feeling after the training, having all of those different perspectives, getting all of the tools, right? The training topics that they covered were really important. So even thinking about, right, that structured training, even from the beginning, right, before you even put people on the floor, right, to do their job, is what type of training are you providing for them prior to them actually stepping in, right? And this doesn't have to be extensive. They are there for a short period of time. I know trainings can take a long time, but right, this could also be done during onboarding process, pre-onboarding process. And really thinking about, right, if you want interns to have specific trainings already done prior to them starting, whether they're done virtually or you need to send them in person somewhere, what does that look like, right? So it's a lot about thinking pre, during, and then even post, right, their externship. And that structure really creates an opportunity for you to build a really great experience for that student. All right, so the role of an intern and employee can often be blurred, right? And I mentioned a little bit earlier of some things, what is and what isn't, but I'm going to get into it in this slide here, right? So purpose and focus of an intern's role is primarily educational and skill building, right? While an employee is hired mainly to perform duties to contribute to organizational goals. So if we can either use the chat or if you want to open up your mic, I want to hear from you. What is the difference between an intern and an employee? What are the differences? Responsibilities that would be assigned to them. Yep. Not as high on caseloads. Absolutely. What else? Any other answers for this? All right, I'm gonna give you a couple of different things. Add a couple more things to your list. So, right, there's the compensation and benefits difference, right? Interns are often unpaid or receive stipends from either their specific programs or their schools if those are available, right? Whereas to employees are paid wages or salaries. They usually they usually also receive benefits such as healthcare, PTO, all of that, right? So there is a difference there. The duration and commitment, right? Interns are typically short term, between right a few weeks to maybe a couple of months, while employment is ongoing and long term, so there's no set date. Right. I see intern is learning, training, short term. Yeah, there we go. And then lastly, right, the expectations and responsibilities. So interns are expected to learn under supervision with limited responsibility, right? So they're not being handed, a full caseload, whereas employees are accountable for more independent work, right, for productivity and performance outcomes. So there is a huge difference, right, between what an intern and an employee is, right? So really thinking about what am I, right? Am I providing a structured experience that doesn't overwhelm, right, the intern, right? That is manageable. Am I giving them a caseload that's manageable? Am I giving them, right, time to discuss their experience and feedback? So really thinking about some of those things early on as you shape your programs and or structure your training and lessons over time, right? Effective communication is fundamental for preceptorship for several reasons, right? It helps establish trust and rapport with your interns, making them more comfortable to learning openly, right? When interns feel heard and understood, they feel more likely to be comfortable and open to feedback and learning, right? Interns can ask questions and express concerns and engage fully in their experience. And then it helps with resolving conflicts and addressing any concerns that may arise during the learning process, right? So by effectively listening to concerns and engaging in constructive dialogue, right, preceptors can identify root causes of issues from the get-go, right? If you allow something to, right, to simmer over time, right, eventually it's going to overflow, right? So allowing for those, the kind of identifying those root causes of issues is going to be a more collaborative. You'll take on a more collaborative approach with those interns to find solutions together. Let's see, anything else in the chat? No. Okay. So interns who experience clear and effective communication during their opportunities are better equipped with skills needed for professional success, right? So I'm going to share this other statistic with you. Preceptors who focused on clear communications saw a 50% of increase in intern retention rates, right? This was a report that HRSA did in 2020. So we actually a couple of days ago, our CEO Luis sent us a an article to read saying that by 2037, there was going to be a shortage of about over 300,000 healthcare professionals. Right, when we think about some of these opportunities for students, it's going to also help with some of those shortages long term, right? If they're feeling comfortable, if they are being trained, if they're building trust, building connections, right? It's more likely that they will stay, right? So long term, essentially these programs, right, are pipeline programs, such as the AHEC Scholars Program is one of the programs that was developed, right, to support some of these shortages. And so thinking about, right, we can't afford to lose any more healthcare professionals. It's really about building the workforce, right, from, pretty much from scratch. That's essentially what you're doing with a lot of these students, is shaping them, right, in the process. So we're going to dig in a little bit into the communication, right? What is effective communication? There are 6 main things linked to effective communication. So it's active listening, clarity, empathy, effective conflict resolution, and nonverbal cues. And we're going to dig into these individually and really talk about, what active listening really means, right? What empathy is, and really thinking about some of these things as you structure your training. So let's break it down a bit. So active listening involves attentively listening without interruption, right? Oftentimes, and we're human, our brains work in mysterious ways sometimes, but it's not about listening to provide a response. It's really about listening without interruption. Using nonverbal cues to show engagement, whether you're shaking your head, whether you're right, kind of responding a little bit without giving full responses. It's kind of reflecting back what the speaker said to confirm that understanding. The benefits of active listening is that it leads to improved understanding and stronger relationships over time, right? It's more effective when you're doing conflict resolution as well, right? As you are actively listening to someone's, involvement in a situation with a patient that might have been in crisis, right? So this is all, all links back to important ways to connect with people. Statistics highlight it's a positive impact on satisfaction and retention rates, right? So if folks are feeling heard, right, if folks are feeling like you are listening to their concerns, you're addressing those concerns, and there's action behind that, behind those things, they're gonna feel like they can trust you, right? Active listening assists in clarifying information, right? Tailoring feedback, showing respect, encouraging openness, in addressing issues and preventing misunderstandings, which could be huge in a fast-paced environment, right? So, do you have the time, right, to really, or do you make time to sit and listen, right? A lot of this stuff could take place during supervision if you build those into your training, right? This could all be part of that experience. What is clear and concise communication, right? When information is presented in a structured and straightforward manner, it reduces the risk of misinterpretation, right? So simple language, right? In the nonprofit world, right? I've worked in different nonprofits. There's always different acronyms. It gets really complex. Right, certain terminology that's only used in those specific spaces, they might not even know any of that, right? So really thinking about, avoiding some of those technical terms until they start becoming familiar with them. But also if you're introducing some of those terms, that you define what they are, right? Not just saying an acronym and then moving forward and then they're like, I have no idea what that is, right? So structure information, right? Presenting information in a logical sequence, using headings and bullet points if you're providing material for them to read, PowerPoints and things like that, as part of trainings. and breaking down the information in chunks that are manageable, right? Again, think about like your own first experience, even coming on, whether you've had externship experiences in the past, or even coming on to your first job, how overwhelming it feels as you are learning all of the information that you're being given at work, right? It does feel overwhelming. And so breaking down some of those things in smaller learning kind of waves really supports the interns in digesting the information and really learning it, right? Being direct and to the point. Avoiding unnecessary details if it's on a need to if it's only on a need to know basis, right, and if it's not relevant to what you're discussing. Again, being new, you're being bombarded with a lot of information in a lot of different ways. And again, a lot of these folks, whether they're hands-on learning, right, practicing some of these skills in the clinic, if they're on the programming side of things as well, right, how are they being direct, right, in what you're asking is really important. Providing examples of things, right? So not just assuming that because you provided instructions that they will do the task or complete the task exactly how you told them. Is providing examples, right? Use clear, relevant examples to illustrate complex points or information, right? This can make abstract concepts more tangible and understandable, right? And encourage that feedback, right? Ask for feedback to ensure that your message is being understood as intended, and this can help you adjust communication style as you need it, right? So I want to share a little story of one of my students that started their externship opportunity, and so they go in to meet with their supervisor. They had a lot of family responsibilities, so there were certain days and times that they couldn't go into the clinic, and so as they're discussing their schedule with their supervisor just said, make your own schedule. Now you can just based on that statement, right, you can see how that could go wrong very quickly, which it did, right? So the student, with their responsibilities at home and caring for a sick parent, would come in and out of the clinic at various times, which then became disruptive, right? But if you're being told, make your own schedule, you automatically are going to assume, right, that you can come in whenever you want and you can leave whenever you want. At least I would take it that way as well, right? And so, right, again, this might be the first opportunity for folks, right? Being clear, right? And can prevent these misunderstandings, which 100% preventable, right? Is would have been having that student say, okay, what days can you come? What hours can you come? Okay, this is going to be your schedule, right? Super straightforward, simple. The person has their schedule. They're able to, right, show up during those days and times because they said they're available. So, even simple things like that you would think this is not going to be an issue, right, can become an issue very quickly if we're not clear with our expectations. Now, we think about empathy and emotional intelligence are key to understanding and connecting with your interns, right? By validating their emotions and experiences, right? You show that you show support and build trust, right? And so this can be, this can be a little tricky sometimes because, right, there are certain expectations that you have of folks, right? Show up on time. I recently went through the Managing to Leading program, and as we're doing some activities, we're discussing some challenges that we're having at work. And so my partner was discussing a situation where there was someone that kept showing up late. And I was like, well, have you sat down to talk to them about why they're showing up late? And then it turns out that they were having a family member that was sick and was having to care for them, right? So there might be reasons behind why these things are happening, right? But are you taking the time to really learn, right? What is happening for that person, opposed to just thinking that they're just not showing up on time, right? We all go home to our personal lives. We all have various things that we have to manage. And so we can't automatically think, right, that go to the conclusion that they're just, right, if someone's being late, that they're just doing it because they don't want to be there. Right?
Andres, I
Yeah.
have a quick note on that. So
Sure.
if there are issues, like how would we set the stage for that? Would the preceptor ask about if there is anything that they need to know, if there are any issues with their coming on time? I mean, should they
Yeah.
set the expectations at the beginning, and then also the intern to let them know ahead of time that I may end up coming late because of the family situation? I just want to let you know. That's where I was, it's still I mean, stressing on the communication. I think that's always missing, and that's where it takes a long time to figure out what.
Yeah.
I just felt that. I thought I wanted to share with you. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. And I think, and I can speak for some of the students that, again, in my program, is that some of them already have either part-time or full-time jobs, right? We live in one of the most expensive cities in the country, right? People need to work. But again, those opportunities are often not paid. And so, when we think about, these are conversations that you can have from the get-go. Again, with the story that I shared with the student about make your own schedule, it's like you're giving a lot of room for a lot of things to happen in between all of that, right? So what does your orientation look like, right? Are you sitting down with the student to discuss these things, right? You discussing their schedules, right? If they are going to be showing up late, who do they contact, right? If they know that this schedule might start, say again, with a sick family member, for example, right? If they already know that they have doctor's appointments, they have to give rides to this person, right? All of this, are these things that they can communicate with you early on so that right? And you can because at the end of the day, there are two things, right? The person needs their needs met, right? And you also need to meet the needs of your patients at the clinic. So how do you have those conversations so that both of those things, right, are happening at the same time, right? So essentially, right, that conflict resolution, right, and having those clear discussions from the get-go. Thank you, Anu. So I'm going to continue moving through this, right? So being empathetic to people's situations also doesn't mean that you're, right, accepting everything that, right, if they're not showing up. It doesn't mean that, right? I've had students dismissed from their, extern opportunities because the goals, right, the goals were not aligning. Folks sometimes have a lot going on personally and they're not able to fulfill the requirements. It's part of life, right? It's part of the process too, right? So it's not about them just, I can't do this, right? It's not about that. It's how do you clarify those goals from the get-go, and how do you work towards those goals together, right? Being empathetic and understanding to people's situation improves learning outcomes too, right? It's like, okay, I'm being validated and what is happening, I'm being supported through this process. I'm still able to show up. I'm still able to learn, practice these skills, right? I'm getting my hours done for my educational program. So there are ways to do it. Is that, do you have the time? Are you making the time to have those discussions to support people through through these challenges, right? Also, facilitating effective conflict resolution, right? By understanding emotions, understanding perspectives, feelings, right? You as a preceptor can address issues more constructively, right? And find mutually acceptable solutions. Again, it's not about them always, getting everything that they want. Sometimes that's not possible. Again, you are looking out for right, for your patients. So if they're not showing up, right, if they're not there, then they're not fulfilling those hours, and it's causing interruptions for you, right? So you have to find mutually acceptable solutions. Are they able to take care of their needs? Are you able to take care of the needs of, right, the patients and also staff, right? Because if folks are not showing up, that's also causing disruptions for them. And then also, it supports mental health and well-being, right? One of the other programs that I manage, the Collaborative for Retention, Engagement, and Wellness, focuses specifically on, or part of it, focuses on developing wellness for your employees, and that includes the interns, externs that come through your doors, right? So I think we all understand the benefits of mental health and making sure that we're caring for ourselves, right? If we're feeling burned out, it's because the same thing, again, folks are still doing their educational programs. Folks might, have another part-time job or full-time job, right? They're caring for people at home, right? All of these different things. So how do we incorporate, right, the well-being, right, of this person as they're temporarily with you, right? So providing constructive feedback is important for the growth of the intern, right? Feedback should be timely, specific. If we allow things to bubble over, right, or if you wait to give feedback at the end of the externship or internship, it's right. It doesn't allow for time to correct the things that they might, or the behaviors that they might might not be okay with your organization. So balancing positive feedback with areas of improvement helps folks recognize what they're doing well, what they can improve, right? So one thing is, saying, I appreciate your attention to detail, right? This is an example. In the patient assessments, one area of focus that you could be improving could be, right, XYZ, right? It drives continuous improvement when they have that feedback. So they're more willing to correct the things that they're not 100% sure about just yet, right? I don't think about those things as weaknesses. The only reason we don't know how to do something is because we haven't had the opportunity to practice it, right? Once we practice and we get hands-on, then we're able to kind of get to the point of perfecting that skill, right? In any learning or professional development environment, feedback helps individuals understand their current performance, and it provides a roadmap for improvement. It also promotes self-reflection and learning, right? So it makes them think about, okay, this is what I did this time, right? This might not have been 100% correct. They do a lot of self-reflection on what needs to be improved and ways that they can do that, whether they need additional training, additional support, right? It makes them safe to critique their own work, which I think is important, right? It also enhances motivation and confidence. So when interns receive praise for what they're doing well, right, it boosts their confidence. Like, I want to come back tomorrow. I want to practice this more, right? Making them more receptive to feedback, so that they can improve. And then it encourages skill development. So clarity enables learners to focus their efforts to develop targeted competencies, right? So it's all a balance, I think. It's about being thoughtful in how you're creating these training opportunities, and really thinking about the small details, right? Because they are there for a short amount of time. It does take some work on the back end and from even from before the intern gets there. Now, conflict resolution. So I wish that we could get into this a little bit more, but there's not enough time in this training, but really thinking about what restorative practices are, right? Conflict resolution. So restorative practices are a set of approaches that build relationships and strengthen community. And the bottom line is that they repair harm, right? Essentially what we're doing. And that could happen, right? As we have, right, connection relationships with people, there could be misunderstandings, there could be conflict, right? So conflict resolution is an important aspect of preceptorship, right? And so addressing conflicts, calmly, respectfully, focusing on finding solutions that benefit the parties involved, right? And I'll go back to the case of the student that I mentioned was informed to make their own schedule. They were let go without allowing them to discuss right, the reason why. And then we had to have, some back end conversations around, okay, let's talk through this, right? And so there was some negotiation that needed to happen there, but right, are you allowing people, right, to if you're having conflict, are you allowing people to rectify, right, the situation? And is everybody getting their needs met after things have been discussed, right? So using active listening and empathy to understand those different perspectives, right? So, an example could be, let's talk about your concerns or our concerns openly and work towards a solution that satisfies both of us, right? Because it isn't just about, fulfilling one side's, or satisfying one side. It's about, coming to an understanding that both of us are needing something right now, right? We're not getting it, so we need to talk about what those things are. This approach helps in maintaining a positive learning environment, right? It can be difficult because we have to think about cultural and generational differences, right? We work with a range of different people, right? And so what could be okay with you in your culture, right? Or even in, the different generations might not be okay for the other person, right? So we need to think about, how our approach, right, is creating open space for discussion, right? And then preceptorship thrives on collaborative and supportive atmospheres. So conflicts can lead to stress, right? Reduced morale, breakdown of communication, burnout. So, for if they're there for a short period of time, it's a lot, right? As they're learning, these skills, they're also navigating conflicts. And this could happen this can happen with anyone in the health center, right? With their colleagues, could happen with other managers, supervisors. So right, in those cases, if you build rapport with that student, it also gives you an opportunity to advocate for them if that conflict happens with other people, right? So students' success really relies on right, conflict and preceptorship hindering or reducing the students' confidence in their abilities. So you want to make sure that that's handled early on, right? Addressing those conflicts, again, actively listening to them. What was the situation? How can we move forward? What did you learn from this? Right? Because ultimately there's a lesson to learn there for them, right? Focus on their clinical duties and retain positive perception of the profession. All right. See, there is a Anu, it says I have to take, okay, gotcha. Thank you, Anu. Thank you for joining us. So right, we want to think about relationship building and conflict resolution skills essentially help preceptors model professional behavior for interns and demonstrate respectful conflict resolution for improved patient care. So conflict that remains unsolved can distract both preceptors and students from their primary focus, which is patient care, right? So, getting rid of that animosity, from the get-go, is super important, right? As this can affect their performance over time. All right, and then lastly, nonverbal communication can greatly influence how your message is received. So pay attention to your body language, right? Your facial expressions, your tone of voice, remaining open posture, right? If I have my hands crossed and I'm talking to you, does that look friendly, right? Am I using eye contact, right? I know sometimes we're multitasking and right, you might be typing things as you're talking to people, but that also, again, could be a lot of misinterpretation of information during that time if you're not giving folks eye contact, right? According to studies in educational settings, students are 30% more likely to engage and communicate with mentors who display open body language, right? So 65% of people rely heavily on facial expressions alone, right, to determine, right, it could shape the student's perception of that feedback that you're giving them during that time. So, you know, those cues, right, the facial cues, you know, where your hands are, like all of that could dramatically shape, right, that person's perception about what you're saying. I often say it's like it's not what you say, right, it's how you say things that make the difference of how that person perceives that feedback and information that you're giving, right? So I want to do a quick breakout. We're going to do about maybe about 10 minutes or so. And I want you to take a little bit of time to think about these questions. And we're gonna do a couple of breakout rooms. So the 3 questions that I want you to think about, and you might not get through all of these questions, it's okay. These are questions that you can take back and think for yourself later. But I want to have some open discussion in your groups. So how do my listening skills, words, and nonverbal cues shape the way others experience communication with me? So this is going to be a little bit of self-inventory, self-reflection, right? When giving or perceiving feedback or navigating conflict, how can I use empathy and emotional intelligence to strengthen relationships instead of creating distance? And then the last question is, what practices can I adapt? Or I'm sorry, what practices can I adopt to communicate more clearly in everyday situations? So I want us to take about 10 minutes in your groups, discuss these questions, as many as you can get through. And then whatever you don't, these are you'll have access to these slides. You'll be able to access these questions. So let's go ahead and break out into groups now.
Rooms are closed. Rooms are all closed, Andreas. You can resume.
Okay. All right, welcome back, everybody. So I'm curious to see where you where you landed with these questions, and yeah, just share a little bit about what you talked about in your groups. If I could get maybe 1 or 2 volunteers to share out, that would be great.
I can go ahead and speak
Go
for my.
ahead.
So I think we touched upon like effective communication and really like how does it land with an intern? Like how would you really know that they grasp the concept? And I think one of our members had mentioned having them maybe say it back to you or having them like maybe teach it to you to really make sure that what is you're communicating they understand. So I thought that was a really interesting practice to kind of answer that last question of what practices can I adopt is maybe having them teach you to really, right, solidify that information that you're trying to communicate with them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Desiree. If I can get maybe one more person, please, to share out what you discussed in your group. One more volunteer. I don't want to pick you. All right, Shirley, thank you for sharing. Tone of voice and how we respond to others, active listening helps improve working environment, taking consideration for others' feelings, so that you are actively listening and showing support when they need it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shirley. Yes, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you to the volunteers who shared out. So I'm gonna go through a couple of slides here. So active listening, if you think about it, I mean, just all of these skills, right? Not communication in general, right? Effective communication is preventative medicine, right? If we think about it that way. And active listening, is like a vaccination, right? It helps prevent illness by preparing the body. Active listening prevents misunderstandings by preparing the mind to fully absorb the speaker's message, right? Clear instruction is like a health screening, right? We're wanting to prevent larger problems. So we want to make sure that those instructions are clear and concise, right? Providing feedback is like checkups, right? We're doing check-ins around, hey, how are things going? What is that you need support with? What skills do you want to build more, right? Having those open conversations, right? Empathy is like administrative preventative care, right? It addresses the emotional needs before any stress or frustration can escalate into any conflict. And using nonverbal cues is like monitoring vital signs, right? Providing key information about someone's emotional state that words alone may not convey. And then lastly, conflict resolution is like wound care, right? It provides timely attention to care to ensure that healing happens, right? To prevent any further damage. So this is all, if you think about like, it's a formula, right? It's a structure that you can kind of rely on to think about those things from beginning to end, right? Even pre the intern coming to your clinic, what do you need to prepare, right? And how do you structure your training during the time that the student is going to be there, right? And how do you break down that training if the student is going to be there for, right? I don't know, 8 weeks, right? How do you structure those skills, right? The skill set that you need them to learn over that 8-week period, right? And breaking down what that actually means for you and your capacity. All right, so we're gonna do one more activity and then we're gonna wrap up with just a few more slides after that. But I want us to, so there's gonna be a list of scenarios that are gonna be put into the chat. So please download those scenarios because once you get into the breakout rooms, you'll have to open that Word document to access the scenarios that are listed on this slide. I want you in groups of 3, right? You're going to be, if it's not, if there's less than, 3 people, you can just do the preceptor and the intern and then have a conversation about how that communication went. So in groups of 3, you're going to break up into preceptor, intern, observer, right? You're going to choose either a scenario 1 through 6. I would say stick to the same scenario as you switch because you will, each of you will take turns being the preceptor and intern, and then an observer, and then follow instructions on the role play scenario handout, right? The observer provides feedback to the preceptor on how they did during that communication and exchange. And then you're going to rotate roles, right? And until each person is done. Now, we might not get through everyone. I want to give you about 10 minutes to get through these scenarios. If you don't get through it, it's okay. You'll have those scenarios. They will be provided to you in the handouts along with the PowerPoint presentation. So let's go ahead and break out. We'll take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 11:46 and then we'll wrap up the training. There you go. Here we go. All right. So yeah, I hope that the scenarios were helpful and just kind of getting you to think about, different ways of communication, making you a little bit more aware of your own style of communication as well. And how to resolve some of these scenarios that might come up for you. And as you're as you're training, interns. So I have a couple of reflection questions that I want you to think for on your own. Again, the slides will be provided, so you'll have an opportunity to kind of go through them. But I'll just kind of go through the questions. For you to do a little bit of reflection, right? So, did trust, tone, body language, and overall communication shape the interaction, and what impact did that have on the preceptor-student relationship? Right? In what ways did you find yourself adjusting your approach during the conversation, and how did those adjustments influence that outcome? Right? What key takeaways or lesson did you gain from the role play, and how can you apply them to real life preceptorship or mentorship situations? And then lastly, which communication skill, right, whether active listening, empathy, nonverbal cues, constructive feedback, and so on, did you believe is the most important for building strong preceptor-student relationships, and why? Right, so these are all reflection questions that you can go through and kind of think about some of these things. I think it's important, before we engage in any of these, roles, right, or step into these roles, really do some self-reflection, right, about not only our capacity but our skills, right, to really support people through one of the most important things that they're going to go through in their training, right, as part of their training. So we have a couple more slides left. I'm gonna wrap up this training. So a few key takeaways. Again, effective communication skills are a foundation for positive learning environment, right? You're helping folks feel supported, understood, and engaged, right? Strong communication promotes learner growth and development, right? Ensuring that expectations and feedback and guidance are clear and constructive, right? And that's feedback in both directions, both things that their strengths, and also looking at things that they might need improvement on as well. Right, practicing communication skills
I'm sorry,
consistently
Andreas,
builds.
your PowerPoint is not being displayed right now.
Oh, it's not. Sorry about
No.
that.
Mhm.
Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I thought that I had shared the there we go. I think it clicked out when we went to breakout room. All right, here we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, perfect. All right, so strong communication promotes that growth for their learners. So ensuring that those expectations, feedback, and guidance are clear and constructive. Right. Again, the feedback is not only about the things that their strengths, right, things that they're doing that are positive, but also things that they might need extra guidance on, right, skills that might need to be developed a little bit more. So providing both, right, both sides of things. Right? Practicing communication skills consistently builds confidence and trust between the preceptor and the learner, right? Strengthening that relationship is important. Trust is becomes key to really helping the student feel comfortable in letting you know when they're struggling with something, admitting to mistakes, right, when they do happen, because they will happen, right? They're in training. And then ongoing reinforcement and reflection on communication techniques are key to success. So allowing preceptors to adapt and continuously improve, right? Again, whether this is your first experience or you've done this before, there's always room for improvement and for doing things differently, right? Each student that comes your way, right? Each student that you're going to supervise is going to be very different, which means also allowing yourself to adapt, right? And really think about what the student needs and how you can, adapt some of the ways that you do things to also, support the students how they need it. So these are a couple, I've covered quite a bit in these 2 hours. The material that you saw today in this presentation is going to be provided to you along with these resources. So you're going to get a handout. It's called 1 Minute Preceptor, 5 Micro Skills for Clinical Teaching, Mastering the Preceptor Role, and Preceptor Role Play Scenarios that we did in the last activity. So you'll get all of those along with the PowerPoint presentation as well. So you'll have all of this material for you to go back to and do some reflection. I did want to share some opportunities for precepting with some of our programs in the workforce division. And we have 5 programs that you can sign up to become a preceptor for any of our students. And so I'll share a little bit about each of the programs, not in detail, but there are descriptions here. So the family nurse practitioner residency, we take a few students in from Cal State LA every year. The Community Health Fellows program, which was the AmeriCorps program before, and is now not as many students, but structured similarly to how the AmeriCorps program was structured, if any of you host any of those students. And then Allied Health Internship, which takes all allied health tracks. The AHEC Scholars Program, which is all medical assistants. The majority, we do take other allied health tracks. I currently have about 24 students, and a couple of them are PAs, and then the rest are medical assistants. And then we have the medical assistant apprenticeship, and this is a collaboration with Propel America that we formed this year. All of the contact information for each person that leads the program is listed on here. So you can always reach out to any of us if you ever want to host any of our students for their externship, internship opportunities. And then lastly, I just wanted to say thank you. CCALAC, just remind you that CCALAC is a resource for any of your workforce solutions, pipeline programs, hiring, resources and training. So you can always explore more. I wrote or I put down the contact information for my direct supervisor who oversees all of the workforce programming. You can always reach out to Carlos if you have any questions, need any support with any of your workforce, either programming or you need any support. We're here to help you through any of that. So feel free to reach out to him with any of those inquiries. And then lastly, I just want to thank you all for showing up today, for being present, participating, and I hope that this training was helpful. I want to wish you a good rest of your day, a rest of your week. And yeah, I'm here I'll stay here for a few minutes in case you have any additional questions.
Thank you so much, Andreas. On behalf of CCLAC's Training Center and our sponsors at Kaiser Permanente, we thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you for sharing your expertise today, Andreas. An evaluation will pop up on your screen automatically at the end of the session. Please take 2 minutes to share your training experience. Your feedback helps to share future learning opportunities. And as a reminder, you will receive an email of all of the resources and the copy of the presentation covered by Andreas. Be sure to check both your inbox and junk folders for the information from our training center. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at another workshop in the very near future.